The first time I noticed it, I thought it was just the house settling. A soft, dragging scrape, like fingernails across wood, came from behind the old bookshelf in the corner of the living room. I froze, the sound fading as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving nothing but the low hum of the heater and the faint tick of the wall clock. The house had been empty for years, or so the realtor had said. Empty, except for the strange drafts and cold spots that seemed to follow me from room to room. I leaned closer, brushing my fingers along the edge of the bookshelf. The wall beyond felt hollow, not like a normal wall, but hollow, almost alive. A draft, faint but insistent, whispered through a crack I hadn't noticed before. I stepped back. My heartbeat echoed in the empty room. Probably just the wind, I whispered to myself, though my voice sounded too loud, too brittle. Then I saw it. A faint outline, a rectangular shadow, almost like a door, framed perfectly behind the books. There was no handle, no knob, just a thin seam, barely visible, as if the wall had been waiting for someone, me, to find it. A whisper curled through the air, soft, almost pleading. Don't open it. I froze, eyes wide, staring at the seam that now seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. And somewhere behind the wall, something shifted. I had no choice. I had to know. I pushed the bookshelf just enough to see the seam clearly. Dust motes danced in the pale light spilling from the window, but behind the seam, darkness seemed to swallow it whole. The wood groaned under my fingers as though protesting some trespass, but the wall didn't give. I ran my hand along the outline, feeling the faint vibration beneath the surface, like something breathing, waiting. The house had always been strange. It wasn't just the whispers of wind through broken shutters or the floorboards that creaked in impossible directions. It was the feeling of being watched, even when I was alone. Every room had corners that refused to stay in place, shadows that clung too long to walls, and drafts that came from nowhere. But this felt different, dangerous. I leaned closer and pressed my ear to the wall. At first, nothing. Then a soft scratch. Then a whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it. Go away. I jerked back, heart hammering. My phone slipped from my pocket, clattering across the floor. In the dim light, I could see the crack in the wall again, like a thin black wound. I knelt, staring, trying to decide whether to call someone to run. And then the whisper returned, more insistent, closer somehow. Who's there? My voice was brittle, fragile. The only reply was silence. I tried to rationalize. This was an old house. Old houses had noises. Old houses had drafts. Old houses had secrets. The realtor had said it was perfect for someone looking for a quiet retreat, away from the city. But she hadn't mentioned the way the air always seemed to move against you here, or how the rooms felt smaller than they should be, corners folding in when you weren't looking. I stepped back from the seam and ran a hand through my hair, trying to calm myself. The living room, which had looked familiar just minutes ago, now felt alien. Shadows pooled along the edges of the ceiling. The bookshelf, though just a piece of furniture, seemed to loom like a sentinel guarding the unknown. I remembered my neighbor's words from last week, offhand but sharp in retrospect. You ever find a door in this house that wasn't supposed to be there? Don't! Just leave it alone. I had laughed at the time. Old neighbors, old stories, right? But now, with the seam before me, her warning crawled under my skin. I spent the next hour circling the living room, pulling books off shelves, tapping the wall, looking for hinges, for knobs, for anything that might indicate a secret passage. The air grew colder, heavier, almost suffocating. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then settled. In that beam, I could see the outline of the seam clearly, but it didn't behave like any door I'd ever seen. No edges, no handle, no keyhole, just a silent invitation, impossible to resist. Then I noticed the smell. Faint at first, barely there, like damp earth mixed with something metallic. It wasn't unpleasant, not yet, but it clung, coating the edges of the seam, seeping into the air around me. I gagged slightly, covering my nose, heart racing. Something had been behind that wall. Something had waited. I backed away, pacing the room. Every instinct screamed to leave, but curiosity, that insidious thing, wouldn't let me. My hand hovered over the seam again. I thought about the neighbor's warning, about the stories of hidden rooms in old houses. People found them, and sometimes they didn't come back the same. Some went missing entirely. Some found things that should never be touched. I swallowed, and then I saw it. A faint, nearly imperceptible shift along the wall. A ripple, like the surface of water disturbed. My fingers trembled as I pressed against it, and the seam gave way just slightly, as if testing me, as if inviting me in. I pulled the bookshelf away fully, heart pounding, and for a moment the wall seemed alive. A draft escaped, cold and insistent, carrying with it that faint metallic tang and a whisper I couldn't understand. I knew I shouldn't open it. Every rational part of my mind screamed to walk away, to leave the house, to call someone. But the pull was unbearable. Something inside me had already crossed the line. I pressed my palm against the wall. A soft click, then a shudder ran through the floorboards. The seam widened just enough to reveal nothing, just darkness. I leaned closer. My breath fogged the air. My flashlight barely penetrated the black, but I could see the outline of the floor continuing beyond the wall, a space that shouldn't exist. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the other side, not mine. Not anyone's. Something else. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The house, which had seemed silent just moments ago, now breathed around me, waiting, and I realized, whatever was in there, it was waiting for me too. The first night after discovering the seam behind the bookshelf, sleep refused me. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining the hidden room just a few feet away. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every creak of the old house became a footstep. Every shadow was something or someone watching. I told myself it was nothing. Just old houses, just my imagination. But the unease settled into my chest like a stone, heavy and immovable. By morning I was jittery, running my hands along the walls, listening for whispers. That metallic earthy smell lingered in the air. I noticed things I had never noticed before. A faint scratch near the baseboards, a book slightly moved on the shelf that had been perfectly aligned the night before. Small, almost imperceptible details, but enough to make my skin crawl. I needed answers. I called the previous owner, an elderly man named Mr. Hargrove. His voice was brittle, tremulous. "You found it?" he asked before I could speak. His words hung like cobwebs. "Found what?" I asked, trying to mask my unease. "The room." Just don't open it. Some things are best left buried." "I don't understand." "There's a wall." He cut me off. It wasn't always a wall. That house, it keeps secrets. Some don't care who finds them. They just wait. They always wait. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, cold sweat on my forehead. Later that day, I spoke to neighbors. Most avoided eye contact. One older woman, clutching a knitted shawl, whispered, "People disappear there." Not all of them, but enough. The walls, they remember. I laughed nervously, but the sound felt hollow. Memories of the house's oddities, the drafts, the cold spots, the shadows that lingered, flooded me. The house had been hiding something, and now it was awake. That night, I finally mustered the courage to examine the seam again. My flashlight cut a narrow path through the darkness. The floor beneath the hidden space seemed lower, as if the room had sunk into the earth. I tried pressing, tapping, pushing, but the wall didn't give, not fully. And then I heard it, a soft shuffling from the other side. I froze. "Hello?" My voice cracked. No answer. The shuffling became a whisper. I couldn't make out the words at first, just fragments, broken syllables. "Don't. Stay. Leave." I stumbled back. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the hardwood floor. The whisper became a hiss, angry, almost human. My pulse thundering, I realized something had been waiting for someone, anyone, to find it. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the seam pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. My dreams were a jumbled mix of dark corridors and walls bending inward. I woke drenched in sweat, convinced the room had grown while I slept. Over the next week, I started documenting the house's oddities. Small events, almost meaningless in isolation, but together forming a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Voices in the dark, whispering, calling my name, fragments of conversations I didn't remember having, objects out of place. A chair turned slightly, a rug folded over. A book opened to a page I didn't read, shadows moving independently. Corner shadows stretching across walls, vanishing when I looked directly at them. Temperature shifts, cold spots forming in hallways, in corners of rooms, around the hidden seam. I became obsessive. I marked each anomaly in a notebook. hoping that cataloging them might make sense of the madness. But the house didn't care for logic. It moved around me, changing, adapting, watching. One evening, I decided to investigate the history of the property. The local library had records going back over 100 years. I found names, dates, and incidents that made my stomach churn. The Wexler family, 1920s. Father vanished. Mother found days later muttering about walls that whispered. The Carmichael estate, 1950s. 2 children disappeared. Authorities never found evidence, but neighbors claimed voices behind the walls. Mr. Hargrove, 1980s, inherited the house. Neighbors spoke of his odd habits, like talking to the walls at night. I realized I wasn't the first. Far from it. The house had claimed attention before, quietly, inexorably. And now it had me. That night, as I sat in the living room, flashlight in hand, the whispers returned, louder, more insistent. The seam seemed to pulse with anticipation. I pressed my palm against it, half expecting it to resist, half hoping it would give way, and then the door opened. Not fully, just a sliver, revealing darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow the light from my flashlight. My breath caught. The air from within smelled ancient, metallic, like rust and wet earth. I couldn't see the floor, the walls, nothing, just the darkness. And from within it came the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, pacing, circling, waiting. I backed away, but curiosity rooted me in place. The hidden room had a presence, almost alive, almost sentient. It had waited, and it was patient. Over the next few days, the house began to change more aggressively. Doors that I had left closed were ajar. The drafts became biting, curling around me, searching for openings. I started hearing knocks on walls where no walls existed. Sometimes a faint tapping followed me from room to room. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe it was fatigue, stress, isolation. But then came the night I found writing on the floorboards. Faint letters scratched into the wood. Leave or join us. No one else had been in the house. No one else could have written it. The letters were gone the next morning, but the sense of warning lingered, tangible and suffocating. I spoke to Mr. Hargrove again. This time his voice was sharper, colder. You can't leave it alone. Once it knows you've found it, it wants you. There's no choice. What is it? I demanded, panic creeping into my voice. Not what, he said. Who? Or what used to be. The walls remember. They keep what belongs there. The next night I heard breathing from the hidden room. Not human breathing. Deep, wet, dragging, as if the air itself exhaled with intent. Shadows began appearing outside the seam, stretching across the floor, curling upward. The whispering was constant now, murmuring my name, fragments of my own thoughts spoken aloud. I tried to escape the house, but every time I reached the door, I found it locked from the inside. The windows wouldn't budge. I was trapped, but the house didn't need to hold me physically. It had ways of controlling me, ways of making my mind bend. Objects started moving in the rooms I hadn't even touched. Cups slid across counters. Chairs turned on their own. A book fell open to a page describing a hidden chamber in an old Pennsylvania mansion, almost identical to mine. The text was scratched into the paper, as though it had been written by hands from behind the walls. Neighbors began to notice changes in me. One evening, Mrs. Willoughby, the older woman from down the street, confronted me as I left the house for a rare walk. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she whispered, eyes wide. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. She grabbed my arm. "It's already too late. They've chosen you. It's in the walls now." "Can you hear it?" I did, faintly, almost too soft to notice at first. A slow, deliberate pulse through the house, like the heartbeat of something enormous, alive and patient. That night, the whispers became voices, fragmented, distant conversations. I heard a child laughing, a man cursing, a woman sobbing, all behind the seam, all inside the hidden room. And then one voice, unmistakable, whispered directly into my ear. "We've been waiting." I realized the house wasn't just haunted. It wasn't just hiding something. It was hungry, aware, and relentless. And I had walked willingly into its maw. Every day the hidden room became more pronounced. I could feel its presence even when I left the house, a cold shadow following me, creeping along the edges of my vision. Sleep became impossible. My mind frayed at the edges, paranoia wrapping around every thought. I started recording. Audio, video, notes, anything to prove what was happening. But every recording came back wrong, Audio distorted, video static, notes smudged. The house was rewriting itself, erasing evidence, mocking me. And still, I needed to see it. Needed to know what was behind the seam, because something had been there long before me. Something waited, and I had found it. This sets up the full psychological and supernatural buildup, introducing the house's history, micro-events, whispers, and escalating paranoia, directly leading to the climax, where the protagonist fully confronts the horror behind the hidden room. The night the hidden room finally revealed itself fully, I knew there was no turning back. The air in the house had grown heavier over the past week, thick and suffocating, as if it had absorbed all the fear I carried and now returned it multiplied. Shadows no longer lingered just in corners. They moved freely, stretching along walls, slithering over floors, twisting in ways impossible to reconcile. I stood in the living room, flashlight trembling in my hand. The seam behind the bookshelf had widened slightly overnight, like a slowly breathing mouth. Every instinct screamed to run, but curiosity, that relentless monster, rooted me to the spot. "Please, just let me see," I whispered. The house responded, not with sound, but with movement. The floorboards shifted beneath me, subtle at first, then violently, throwing me forward. Dust exploded into the air. My flashlight flickered, and then the seam opened completely, revealing the hidden room in all its darkness. It was smaller than I had imagined, but impossibly deep. Shadows pooled like water, swallowing the edges of my vision. The air smelled of rust, earth, and something acrid, almost decayed. And then I saw it, or them. Figures moved in the darkness. At first, I thought my mind was fabricating. Shapes, tall and thin, humanoid but distorted, swaying slightly as if underwater. Their faces were featureless, smooth like carved wood, yet somehow expressive. They whispered in unison, voices low, guttural, almost chanting, "You found us. You belong now." I stumbled backward. What are you?" My voice sounded absurdly small against the enormity of the dark. A scraping noise from the corner of the room turned my attention. One of the figures stepped forward. Its movement was fluid, unnatural, limbs bending in ways impossible for any human. And yet, it felt sentient, alive, deliberate. "You shouldn't be here," I said, though my voice cracked. "This isn't yours. Go back." The figure tilted its head, and though it had no eyes, I felt its gaze pierce me. A low, wet whisper filled the room, vibrating against my bones. Too late. The walls began to pulse, subtly at first, then violently, like the heartbeat of some immense creature. Dust and loose debris lifted from the floor, swirling in a cyclone around me. I tried to turn and run, but the doorway I had entered through no longer existed. The wall had swallowed it, folding space in ways I couldn't comprehend. A second figure appeared behind me, its presence so close I could feel cold air against my neck. I spun, flashlight swinging wildly. Shadows stretched across my vision, elongating, twisting, merging with the figures until the room became an endless void, a place where dimensions bent and time unraveled. I screamed. A high, unbroken wail, and for a moment there was silence. Then voices, dozens, hundreds filled my head. Memories that weren't mine, faces I had never seen, laughter and weeping, screams of people who had vanished long before me. The hidden room had absorbed them all, and now it wanted me too. "Please," I shouted. "I didn't mean to, just let me leave." One of the figures reached toward me. Its hand, impossibly thin, grazed my arm. A shockwave of cold ripped through me. Pain, memories, regret, fear. Everything I had ever tried to suppress rushed to the surface. I fell to my knees, gasping, and the figures swirled closer, their whispers louder, pressing inside my mind. "You can't leave," they hissed, in voices both mine and not mine. The seam of the room seemed to pulse violently, expanding and contracting as if the house itself was alive, breathing, hungry. Furniture from the living room, the couch, the bookshelf, the coffee table, suddenly lifted and collided with the walls, splintering wood and glass. The house was no longer a place. It was a predator. I stumbled backward, tripping over the rug. The flashlight skittered across the floor and illuminated one corner, a small door, previously invisible, now slightly ajar. My eyes adjusted to the blackness beyond, and I saw it. A child, standing perfectly still, pale, eyes wide, blank, staring. A thin smile curved on its lips, frozen, unnatural. And behind it, the walls of the hidden room bent and twisted, growing taller, deeper, expanding endlessly. swallowing the edges of reality. I felt my sanity fraying. My hands shook as I tried to reach for the flashlight. Another figure lunged at me, or maybe I imagined it. I could no longer trust my senses. The child's smile widened, and I realized it wasn't a child. Not really. The form shifted subtly, bone and sinew melting into the wall, until it became part of the darkness itself. "Stop," I whispered, tears streaking my face. "Please stop," the hidden room responded. The walls pulsed. Shadows coalesced into shapes I couldn't name. Humans, animals, forms that should not exist. They closed in from all sides, pressing, suffocating, filling every corner of the room, every corner of my mind. And then I heard it, a whisper, distinct, deliberate, unmistakable. "Join us." My legs gave out. I fell forward and the darkness consumed everything. Time fractured. I saw flashes of previous owners, neighbors, people who had vanished. All trapped, all absorbed, all waiting. And now I was part of the pattern, struggling against inevitability, powerless. I screamed again. The house responded, laughter echoing through the walls, wet and hollow. The ceiling bent overhead, floors collapsing beneath me. My flashlight shattered. I reached out, grabbing at shadows, at walls, at nothing, clawing desperately for some solid surface to hold on to. Then came the voices, close, all around me. "You can't leave. You can't leave. You can't leave." I tried to cover my ears, but the sound penetrated anyway, drilling into my skull. The figures moved in unison, circling, their whispers merging into one unbroken chorus of intent. The walls themselves seemed to reach for me, pulsing, expanding, bending. I felt myself slipping. Memories of my life, my family, my friends, fragmenting, distorted, replaced with images of the hidden room, of all the people it had claimed. My body felt weightless, unreal, as though I was dissolving into the darkness. A single thought clawed its way through my panic. I had found it. I had opened the room, and now it had found me. The figures lunged simultaneously. Darkness swallowed everything. Time fractured. Pain, cold, fear, and inevitability wrapped around me. I screamed, and the scream echoed endlessly, fading into the walls that were now alive, sentient, omnipresent. Then silence, or at least the kind of silence that leaves your mind screaming. When the world righted itself, I was no longer in the living room. The room I now stood in, or floated in, was impossible. Shadows stretched infinitely, the air thick, metallic, carrying whispers that were both mine and not mine. The hidden room had expanded beyond comprehension. It had no walls, no ceiling, only depth and presence. I realized, in the quiet that followed, that escape was impossible. The house had won. I was trapped, but not physically. I was trapped in perception, in reality, in time itself. The hidden room had claimed another soul, another mind, another witness, and yet, as I stared into the impossibly deep darkness, I understood something more terrifying. I could still see the seam, faint, inviting, pulsing. It waited for the next person to find it. The hidden room was patient. It had always been patient, and now I understood that curiosity was never innocent. I woke, or thought I did. The world around me felt wrong. The air was thick, almost viscous, pressing against my skin. Shadows lingered in corners that didn't exist, and the floor beneath me rippled faintly, like water disturbed by a breeze. My limbs felt heavy, uncooperative, and yet my mind was hyper-aware of every sound, every movement, every whisper of the house that had claimed me. I staggered to what I thought was the living room. The bookshelf was gone, vanished as though it had never existed. The seam, the hidden room, was still there, faintly pulsing, waiting. I realized then that the room was no longer just a room. It was a presence, a force, a living memory of every person it had ever claimed. Outside, I could hear life continuing. Cars, voices, the distant hum of city streets. But I was cut off, not by walls or doors, but by perception itself. The hidden room had folded the house around me, bending reality so that the outside world existed only as a concept, unreachable, untouchable. I tried to scream, but my voice was swallowed instantly. Whispers, familiar and alien, filled my ears. "You can't leave. You belong here. You always belonged." Memories of the people the room had claimed flickered before my eyes. Mr. Hargrove, the vanished children, neighbors who had warned me, fragments of my own past. and I saw their terror mirrored in my own reflection. Though my reflection had no face, just the shadow of what I once was. Days passed, or hours or seconds. Time had lost meaning. I could feel the presence of those who had come before, trapped in the walls, in the floor, in the very air I breathed. They whispered guidance, warning, pleading, and sometimes mocking. Every creak, every draft, every flicker of shadow reminded me that I was not alone. I was never alone. I tried to reach out, to touch the walls, to understand the patterns, but the room shifted beneath my fingers. Every time I thought I could map it, it morphed, as if aware of my attempts, as if alive. I began to understand that it had no door, no lock, no key, because it didn't need one. It was not a space. It was intention. Occasionally, the seam would widen, faintly, teasing me with glimpses of a world I could no longer access. I saw fragments, streets, windows, faces, so close, so real, yet forever unreachable. And each time it closed, I felt the weight of inevitability settle more heavily on my chest. I could not leave. I could not escape. The hidden room had claimed me, body and mind, and folded me into its existence. I found myself wandering the room endlessly, tracing patterns in the shadows, listening to the whispers, following shapes that dissolved when approached. Sometimes I thought I heard my own voice calling from behind walls I couldn't see, asking for help, for release. But it was only me, or what I had become, trapped in a loop, repeating in the corridors of the room that had no end. And then I realized something more terrifying. The hidden room wasn't static. It was patient, yes, but it was also curious. It waited for new eyes, new hands, new minds to find it. It expanded and contracted, folded and bent. And I became a part of its memory, part of its story, whispering warnings that no one else would ever heed. Somewhere in the house, or somewhere outside it, someone will find the seam. A curious child, a new homeowner, a repairman. They will notice a draft, a strange outline, a faint whisper calling them closer. And I will be there, waiting in the shadows. My voice one among hundreds, blending warnings with temptations. I remembered the old warnings. The words of neighbors and Mr. Hargrove. Don't open it. Some things are best left buried. Once it knows you found it, it wants you, all true. And yet no warning could stop curiosity. No caution could save anyone from the inevitability of the hidden room. It feeds on curiosity, on desire, on the human need to understand what should never be understood. And I had fed it. The last coherent thought I had before everything began to dissolve completely was simple. Chilling and absolute, I should have left it alone. The house, the room, the shadows, they were patient. They wait. And when they find you, when they sense the curiosity that cannot be quelled, the waiting ends. Somewhere, beyond the seam, a faint draft brushes the edge of the world. Somewhere, someone will hear the whispers, and I will be there, waiting. Even now, in this place that exists and does not exist, I can feel the pulse of the house extending outward, through walls, through streets, through time itself. And the room hums softly, almost like a heartbeat for the curious, for the daring, for those who open doors that were never meant to be found. The final whisper drifts through the darkness around me, singular, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Welcome to your new home. And the seam pulses once more. I am part of it now, and it will never let me go. This resolution completes the story in a lingering, psychological horror style. Shows aftermath. Protagonist trapped mentally and spiritually. Maintains atmospheric tension. Shadows. Whispers. Warped perception. Ends with a final, chilling reveal. The hidden room continues to claim, leaving unease and inevitability.